of Holocaust Museum LA. My name is Michael Morgenstern, and I am pleased to welcome you to our discussion with Joe Alexander, a Holocaust survivor from Poland. Before we begin, I would like to share a few words about the museum. I would also like to apologize in advance for possibly slow internet. We have some weather issues outside. Holocaust Museum LA is the first Holocaust survivor founded Holocaust museum in the United States. In the 1960s, a group of survivors worked together to create a memorial for their loved ones who perished in the Holocaust. And this memorial eventually, the survivors who established their museum did so with a mission to commemorate, educate, and inspire future generations. Furthermore, they mandated that the museum should always be free to the public, making Holocaust education accessible to everyone. Even though we are not able to be in our museum's physical space for the time being, we are still able to carry forward their mission. This morning you'll have the honor and privilege of listening to Joe Alexander, who will share his story with you. After Joe shares his story, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. Those watching on Zoom can use the Q&A box, and those watching on Facebook can type in your questions type in your questions in the comments on Facebook. And Joe will answer as many questions as possible. Before we begin, I also just want to remind everybody that yesterday was International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and for those who know, there are two Remembrance Days a year, one designated by the United Nations shortly after the war ended, and the other one designated by the State of Israel, which falls on the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, so that coincides with Passover, more or less. But this one, yesterday, January 27th, is the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, and as you will learn, that is not the end of the Holocaust, but it was, of course, significant. And Joe will share with you his recollections of Auschwitz and what he experienced before and after that. Joe has also been speaking at our museum and participating in all of our educational programs for many years now, and it's my honor to welcome him. Thank you so much, Joe, for being with us this afternoon and for sharing your story.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much for being here, for the introduction. Am I ready to go on, Michael?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, my name is Joe Alexander. I'm a Holocaust survivor from Poland, and I survived 12 camps. I come from a small town in Poland, and my father was in business, and we had a very good life until 1939, when the Germans came into Poland. They divided Poland in two parts. One half was annexed to the Third Reich, Germany. The second part was Poland under German occupation. We lived on the part where it was annexed to the Third Reich. So after a short time, they came into town and they went, we know, some of you probably know that in Europe, every town had a town square. And the town square is where most of the business are. We lived in the town square, the second house from one corner of the square, and the third house was an uncle of mine. So they came in and went after my uncle and around the square and told the people they have 10 minutes to get their possessions and get out in the middle of the square, and they took them away. So rumors started that they're going to come back 3 days later and take the rest of us. So my dad said, I'm not going to wait for them to come and give us 10 minutes. So he went out and he got rented a wagon, a horse and wagon, a deep one. We had deep wagons in Europe, about 6, 8 feet deep. And he got one, and we picked up most of the stuff from the store, and you put a few pieces of house goods, like bedding and a couple pieces of furniture on top, because from our part to the other part of the home, we had to go through a border. So put some household goods on top that we moved. And my parents and one sister and young brother, they left. And I remained with two older sisters. And we were loading up another way. In the meantime, the Polish people were coming to town and tried to buy anything they could get. Because now you take the business people out, they're afraid they won't be able to buy anything. So I sold a man a bicycle and a boat of shirt material. And on the way home, he had to pass the police station, so he got stopped. They thought maybe they were looting. So I asked him, where did you get it? He said, I bought it. And he showed me a receipt. I said, I don't have a receipt. So then go and bring the person who sold it to you. So he went, so he comes back to me, and he said, you have to come to me with the police, the police station, and town, what happened. So I went to the police station, and asked me, did you sound that? He said, yes. Well, why didn't you give him a receipt? I said, we told him we didn't give a receipt. So I took that boat material, smashed the guy, and okay, go. And I went back, and my sisters were waiting for me, ready to take off. And we left. And we left, and we went. My father had 3 sisters living 25 kilometers before Warsaw, to a city named Blunin, which at that part was the Poland under German occupation. So we took off, we went there, and when we came there, their life was going on almost normal. They had people still in business, so forth. It was almost normal. But then they say everybody has to go to work. So I went, that's when I went to my first camp. It was 1939. I went to my first camp. There was a camp. I was working building a canal. And you stay in the water up to the knee without boots. But this was a camp where you work during the week. On the weekend you could go home. So I worked there for a while. Then I got looked for. I had sores on my arms, on my legs. So I went home one weekend and I said, I'm not coming back. On Monday morning, the police came to look for me. So my dad said, he's not here, he's supposed to be in the camp. So they left. They left and I stayed away from home for a while. I just stayed with my cousins and my friends. So then that was the time the way they started to build the wall in Warsaw, where the ghetto was going to be, the Warsaw Ghetto. So after they got through building the wall, they came out with an order, all the Jews living within 50, 60 kilometers has to move into the ghetto. So we moved into the ghetto, and the life in the ghetto, you can't even imagine what it was. It was terrible. It was very bad because the ghetto they built was a small section of Warsaw, and they put in 260,000 people. So it was very bad because people were dying every day. You walked out in the morning on the streets, there were dead people on the streets, on the sidewalks, everywhere. So I lived in the ghetto over 4 months, close to 5 months maybe, and found out that back home, since we left, nothing changed. Everything remained the same. So my parents decided for a older sister and I had a younger brother and we should go back home. So they had to get out of the ghetto. So we got out. We had to pay off the guards at the gate to get out. So we got out and we decided my sister and brother take one street and I'll take another street. And we walked through town and we meet on the outskirts of town. I walked for a couple, 2, 3 blocks, and I had a Polish teenager comes over and he said, "Give me some money, I'm gonna report you." So I figured, okay, I gave him some money and I got rid of it. And I kept walking. He got on the streetcar, we rode the streetcar for a few blocks, and got off and comes over, "Give me some more money." So this time I gave him some more money, but I changed street and I lost it. And I walked to the outskirts of town, I met my sister and brother and we went home. So we came home and say everything was the same since we left. But it lasted 3 days. I was there for 3 days and there was an order, all the Jewish men from 16 to 60 report to the schoolhouse. So I reported to the schoolhouse and off I went to the camp. So then when I went to the camps, I worked, the first camp I worked, we were building a dam so that they had a little electric car where you load up from load in one place, they take to another place, they dump it. That was very hard work because we were cutting down the hills. So we had to use picks to loosen up the ground. So the work was very hard and the food you were getting was a piece of bread like this in the morning and a cup of coffee and you went to work. You came back from work, you got a soup, but most of the time was the peels from the potatoes or spinach. From that food, doing this work, you couldn't survive. The only way you could survive is because we work with civilians. Is you can organize, get just a little food, extra food, that's the only way you could survive. So people were dying every day. They were taking people out every morning, dead people from the camp. And where we were in the city, near the city of Poznan, and there was a lot of sub-camps around, in the city and around the city. Excuse me. So people were dying. So what they did is they combined 2, 3 camps into one. After a while, the same thing happened at the other camp. So I got work at different jobs. I was laying cobblestones in Poznan, in the city. Cobblestones. And I was building a sewer. We were working. And I was a roofer. I had all kinds of work. Then the last camp there we were building an airport and I was laying railroad tracks. So after being in 7 camps, a train arrived and it wasn't a passenger train, it was a Holocaust train where you put 40, 50 people put into one boxcar with a little window, a little 2 feet window. They close the doors. Then we get on the car, and the destination we were going, it usually takes maybe 5 to 6 hours at the most. We were riding around for 3 days with no food, no water, no facility, nothing. People were dying on the train. So finally we arrived in Auschwitz. So come to Auschwitz, and the train stopped in downtown Auschwitz. Later on they built the train and went straight into the camp. But at that time when I came, they didn't have that yet. So we stopped downtown, a little town named Oshwenchi. And we got off the train. About 30–40% of the people were dead already on the train. But whoever could walk, walked out. And we were lined up in rows of 5. And we met Dr. Joseph Mengele, if you heard about. He was the doctor called Doctor of Death. He selected people for human experiment or to the gas chamber. So he said he's going to select people to go to the left. The people on the left are going to be taken on trucks. So he took out people, old people, sick people, and young kids. And he put me out to go to the left. If I would come from home, I wouldn't know the difference. But I was already in 7 camps. So every camp I was, when I had to go to work, I usually got in with the biggest groups, with the biggest, the strongest men. So here, he tells me to go to the left, and I look around, I see old people, sick people. I said, that's not the kind of people I like to be with. But my luck was, it was after midnight. If it would have been daytime, I don't think I could have done it. But I did. So after he moved further down, I ran back to the other side. If I didn't run back to the other side, I wouldn't be here talking to you. Because the people on the left were taken on trucks, then straight to the gas chamber. So I ran back to the other side, and we walked to the camp, to Auschwitz. I got a shower, and I came out of the shower, and I got a tattoo on my arm. I don't know if you can see it here in this picture. Yeah, there. I got this tattoo, and from that moment on, you had no name. That was your name. And I got a tattoo, and I would walk to, there's Auschwitz, and there's Birkenau, called Auschwitz too. And I walked over to Birkenau, which is about 3 kilometers. So I walked over to Birkenau, and I was in Birkenau for a while. And you can't even imagine. In Birkenau, when I saw people running to the electric fence to get electrocuted. I saw people being beaten to death. And I saw Dr. Mengele 2 more times in Birkenau. But it was daytime, and he was far away from where I was. So I got through there. And then the camp was getting almost empty, like. I was trying, the camp, they were coming sometimes to say they need people to work. But I didn't trust them. So friends of mine and I, we used to hide when they said they need people to work. We didn't report. But then, after a short time, they said, now we need some people, need some tailors. So my father and my grandfather, we were all tailors. So I report, and they come right in front of me, and they said, "You go back. We don't need anymore. We have enough." So I'm still back in the camp. excuse, excuse me. So I went back. I'm still in the camp. So after a short time, that was 1943, and at the time when the Warsaw Ghetto uprising was. After the Ghetto uprising, they said they need a big transport, but they didn't want to take any people from Poland. Only Hungary, Greece, Italy, any other country but Poland. But on the end, they were short about 300 people, so they said, now we'll take some people from Poland. So I report, and you get on the train, and the same thing, riding around for 3 days, and I was going back to Warsaw Ghetto for the second time. Going back to the Warsaw Ghetto to clean up after the uprising. When we came back, there was no buildings left. All the buildings were all burned out. There was no camp. So we had to build our own. They gave us some prefab, and we had to put together some buildings for us to stay. But in the meantime, until that, there was no facility, nothing, no showers, nothing. So the shirt I was wearing, there was no shirt left anymore because they were eaten up from lice. There was no shreds. Until we built the camp on Sunday, we got a shower, we got some fresh clothes. So when we came back, our work was to be take down all those remaining walls from the buildings, brick by brick, and clean them up and put them up in stacks of 8-10 feet high. And they had Polish people coming in with a horse and wagon, and they were taking these bricks to the railroad station, because they were sending them back to Germany. So that was the only camp we had plenty of food, because we found a lot of goods, household goods, kitchenware, clothing, furniture in the rubble from the burned out buildings. And when the Polish people came in with the horse and wagon, they brought bread, salami, sardines, so we were trading. So we had plenty of food at that time. But a short time after, the typhus broke out. And if you were reported to the hospital, that was the end. Nobody ever came out. The typhus is when you get a high fever, high temperature. And I got the high fever, but I didn't report to the hospital because I was in a way was lucky too. I had a couple, which they called like a foreman, and he was a German man, a middle-aged man, but he also was a prisoner, so he was very good. So when I had the temperature, I was sitting with my arms thrust over, and for about 3 days until we got over the fever. Then the Polish underground attacked our camp. They were trying to free us, but they were fighting overnight. They were unsuccessful. So the next morning, they closed the camp, took us out, and to get out of town, we had to jog. They were afraid we were going to get attacked by the underground in the city. So we had to jog to get out. So come late in the afternoon, around dusk, they put us up on a big field where farmers graze their cows. And the ground is very moist. So first on the field, so that means you have a knife, a spoon, anything you could dig up some mud. So you dug up some mud, you took the bottom of your shirt and you squeezed the mud through to get a little water. So we got a little water, stayed overnight there. In the morning, we on the march on the road. So we marched, we come to the next town, there was a river, so let us go to the river to get some water. Two of our people went a little too far into the river. They thought maybe they were going to escape to get out on the other side. So they got shot, were killed in the river. So we got some water and started marching. We marched and come to the next town, and there was the same river, but at that time they said only 100 people at the time can go to the river to get some water. So when we got some water, and we were marching, going, walking again, and that day it was very heavy rain, very heavy. We were walking, we were soaking wet, until we arrived in the afternoon on a little railroad station. We stayed overnight there, and the next morning, the same type of train, Kaduka train, arrived, and we got on the train. In that time, we were riding for 3.5 days, and we went to Germany. So when we arrived in Germany, to a camp named Dachau, which Hitler built in 1933 for political prisoners. Then he turned it into a concentration camp with a gas chamber. So we arrived in Dachau. So for 2 weeks I was doing nothing, just walking around there in the camp doing nothing. Because they were establishing 12 camps with the surrounding area of Dachau, within 50, 60 kilometers. So 12 camps, all by numbers, from 1 to 12. So after 3 weeks, I went to go to the farmer, camp number 1, to a farmer. We were digging potatoes. That lasted 3 weeks. And then I was sent to another camp, about 50 kilometers from Dachau, to a camp named the camp number 7, which was located in a city called Landsberg am Lech. That was a small camp, about 150 people. But when we came there, we were a small group. This was a very small group. We were in the camps already over 4 years. So we had the privilege of getting the better jobs in the camp. So like my friends worked in the kitchen, some were the police in the camp, and that was the only camp I was where women were in the same camp. But they were blocked off by wire fence, 1/4 of the camp, but we went to work together. So they got a little different jobs, some of my friends, and I got a group of 10 people. We were 5 girls and 5 boys to work outside the gate, to the kitchen for the German guards. And there were 2 German men in charge of the kitchen, and they were very, very good to me. They were not the regular army, so they were middle-aged men. They were very good to me, because every day I went back to the camp. I took food back to my friends. Then we always had soup left over from the dinner. So I took a milk, we had big milk cans, put in one of the milk cans, and the next morning, the people going to work, they had to pass by our kitchen. So I stopped them and I gave them some food. couple of times, the officer in charge, the guard complained to my tent, I'm holding up the people going to work. So they said to me, okay, don't worry, let him talk, don't worry about it, do what you do. So that lasted until April 28, 1945. All the 12 camps had to go back to Dachau. So I went back to Dachau, stayed overnight on a field there, on a field court. And in the morning, we were going on called a death march. They're supposed to take us in to in the mountains in Germany. There's a ski resort named Garmisch. So they're supposed to kill us there. But we have walked about 2 days. We knew we're not going to be walking too far because we could hear the fighting. So we knew the American troops are not far behind us. And so planes coming over and bombing the city. So about 2 days, we crossed a little bridge, and the bridge was blown up. So our group was divided in two sections. I was on the right side of the bridge, and we were in a little village, and there was a little forest there. So they took us into the forest and asked for volunteers to take the sick people into the village and put them into the farmers, into the barn, and the volunteers to come back. On the way back, one was a friend of mine, very close friend, and on the way back they found a dead horse in the snow, so they cut off some pieces from the horse and came back, and that friend of mine, he brought me back a piece of horse meat, and that was him here on this picture. His name was Joe Boda. So he gave me a piece of meat, and he said, do something. So we were in the forest, so we had wood, so I made a fire, and I was barbecuing. And believe me, that was the best meal we had in a long time. In the meantime, during the night, the German guard disappeared. So in the morning, German police came, and they take us into the village, and they disappeared. That was the morning about between 8 and 9 o'clock. So we were just walking around in the village and waiting to see what's going to happen. So between 12 and 1 o'clock, an American tank moved in, and we were liberated. So we were free. So the American tank moved in, so the troops were behind them, trying to close off the village. But we were a group, 9 of us. We didn't want to get blocked in. So we broke through and started walking to see where the next town is. So we walked for about 1 or 2 kilometers. There was a German bakery. So we went into the bakery and everybody got a bread. If you had a bread, you were okay. We start walking to find the next town. Then we come to a town named Bob Tillett, about 40 kilometers from Munich. And we come into town and we see 3 American soldiers walking, and they were Czechoslovakian descent. They were so drunk they couldn't walk. They were holding on to each other. And but they saw the way we were dressed, I guess. They realized, so they said, are you Polish? I said, yes. So they said, come on. And they took us in to an underground bunker, which was a warehouse you couldn't see the end of. There was so much stuff in there. So the first thing, we changed clothes. Everybody took a backpack. And then there was a big row of bicycles chained up. So they brought the chains, so give everybody a bicycle. Now, we have to find a place to stay. Excuse me. When when the troops came into that village, they brought all the people into that city, and they all used to be a Air Force base, German Air Force base. They made a DP camp, a displaced person camp. So, but we didn't want to go to the camp, so we tried to get out the street. We couldn't. It was 6 o'clock. It was curfew. It was after 6 o'clock. We couldn't get out. So we hopped over about 3 or 4 fences, remember? And we came to a German inn, which was taken over by the American troops. And the back of the inn was an empty house, so we took over the house. So we stayed in the house for about 10 days, and after living there for 10 days, they came out with an order that anybody who lived outside the camp has to move into the camp. So we moved into the camp, and we were taken back to Munich. And Munich was a DP camp. You could live in the camp if you want to, or you can go any place you want. You were free. So I lived in the camp for about 3 days, and some of the friends of mine, we decided to go back to the city of Landsberg, where camp number 7 was, the last camp. To go back there, Landsberg was one of the largest DP camps in Germany. So I went to the camp, arranged at the camp, gave us a room. I stayed there overnight, that room. And the next morning, I moved out. Didn't want to live in the camp. I had over 5 years camp. So I moved out 7 kilometers from town to a village and lived in a farmhouse. I lived in the farmhouse there, and I was doing all right. But after about 6 weeks, I decided to go back to Poland, to my hometown, to find out if any of my family survived. No, when we came to Landsberg and we went to register, the reason we went to register, and even later on, we went to a lot of DP camps to register, in case anybody of your family survived. So everybody went to look through the list of the camps to see if any of your names are there. So I went back home. I come home and go to my house. So I had survivors who were living on the 2nd floor. The 1st floor where some Polish people were living. So they told me none of my immediate family survived, except one of my cousins. He was a year younger than I. We grew up in childhood. We grew up together, went to schools together, made it. He survived, but he's in a different town. So at that time, it was very bad for survivors who came back from Poland, because the Polish people killed a lot of survivors. In one town named Kelce, they killed 42 survivors in one town. Because when they took the Jews out, they moved into the to the houses. Now they didn't want to give up the houses, so they were killing a lot of Jews. So I said the cousin survived in different towns, so I want to go, and I got him, and I told him, I said, tomorrow we're going back to Germany. Because at that time, the safest place he could be was Germany. So I got him, and we went back to Germany. So I lived in Germany for 4 more years, because he couldn't go any place. He had no passport, he couldn't go, and no place to go. So I had to wait until somebody offered up. So after 4 years, that you can go to register Canada, who it will take you. So you have to go and register, then you have to wait for them to call you. It went by a long time, we didn't hear anything. So in the meantime, a friend of mine lived in the next village, and he said, Joe, you can go now to Munich and register to go to America. So we went to Munich, registered to go to America. And in a very short time, I got a notice to go to see the American doctor, go through, and then go checked out by the FBI. And then I got a note to go to Bremerhaven, that's the port in Germany, to get the boat. So I left there on May 13th. I went on the train to go to Bremen, and came to Bremen, and I got on the boat, and I came to the United States, and May 30th, 1949. When I came to the United States, we arrived in New York, went through Ellis Island, and everybody had to have a sponsor. Either you had a relative or an organization. I didn't have any relatives here, so I was sponsored by the Jewish organization called the Joint. And so everybody had a contract. So my contract was to go to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So I went to Harrisburg, and I lived in Harrisburg for about 6 months. And my cousin who survived, he had an uncle here in Santa Monica, and he was his sponsor. So I came in May, and he came in October. So I came to Santa Monica and told his uncle that I'm in Pennsylvania, and we were the only 2 survivors in our family. So the uncle told me a couple of times I should come here so we could be together again. So I arrived in New York, in Los Angeles, in 1950, January 1950, and here I am. Now, if you have any questions for me, so I can answer you.
Thank you so much, Joe, for sharing your story with us. We do have some questions for you, but before we do that, I would actually like to share with the audience some of your photos.
Yeah. To the top right, you see, that was my father. On the left was his brother. He lived in London, England. And those were my grandparents, my grandfather and grandmother on the bottom. That picture was taken in 1923 at the border of Poland and Germany, because my uncle left Poland, didn't want to go to the army, so he went to England. So he couldn't come back to Poland. So they both met at the border. So that was that picture was taken. That was my sister. She was the older sister. And there's these only picture I have is of just of her. The rest of the family I don't have anything. This is the train we were riding in. That's the boxcar where they put 40, 50 people into the boxcar. As you can see, as you can see there, this is my number, and this is my liberation papers from Dachau. When I was liberated, and there's my number, 142584. That's the tattoo from Auschwitz. This is the way we lived in the camp. One section, you see, was for 3 people. The one on the second row to the right, way over to the right, you see a little man down here. That was Eli Wiesel. That was him here. So this is the way, the section that we live. There is a picture in front of the farmhouse where I used to live in Germany. And the man on the left, the tall guy, that was my friend who brought the horsemeat. And on the right, that's my cousin. This is a driver's license I have from Germany, which is, there's no expiration date on this. It's a lifetime driver's license. That's Dachau. I don't know, Mike, do you have the one from Auschwitz?
I don't have that one here, but
Well, maybe that.
I can probably find it and pull it up by the end.
This is the boat I arrived in the United States called SS Stewart. This boat was going back and forth. Matter of fact, I came on this boat in May, and my cousin, though he came in October, he came on the same boat. But the boats were going back and forth that time. Here's a picture of me when I lived here in Victorville. I was at the Air Force Base. We had a tailor shop there at the base. That was my first car.
Thank you again so much for sharing your story, and we do have quite a few questions. So let's see. First question is, did you eat meat when you were in any of the camps?
Me? What was that?
Meat. Did you eat
I know.
I see what you're saying.
Meat? No, you didn't see any meat. There was no meat. We only ate soup, and there's just a piece of bread. That's all.
When you talked about returning to your hometown of Kobol, I think once or twice, can you talk about that experience of going back afterwards?
Well, the experience wasn't a happy one. So they came back, and nobody, my whole family was gone. Plus so many relatives, uncles, aunts, cousins. Nobody was there, nobody left. So it was a very bad feeling. But I wanted to go back and to see myself. So feeling wasn't good.
Thank you very much. And if you can remind the audience, how old were you during all of this? So we'll say from 1939 through 1945. How old were you?
Well, I was 16 when I started, and then I was 21 when I was liberated.
Thank you very much. Let's see.
And now I'm 98.
Thank you very much. One of our audience members would like to know what the biggest thing is that has helped you cope with trauma afterwards, and what's helped you throughout the rest of your life to cope with these experiences.
Well, to help me is to go on with my life, build a new life, but you can't forget the old life. You think about it every day, but there's nothing you can do about it. So life goes on. And you have to build a new future. And this is my life now is, what I'm doing is trying to educate the young people, talk to all the schools, as many schools I can, and to let them know what happened, and to let them know that if some people, there's a lot of Holocaust deniers, a lot of anti-Semitism going on, not to believe what they hear or see. They let them know that here, they're talking to a survivor who lived through it. So this is my whole thing now. It's just to talk to as many people I can.
Thank you very much. And it's a related question to that. What advice would you give to younger generations in order to prevent this sort of thing from happening again?
Well, like I tell them, you hear about Holocaust deniers, or you see some anti-Semitism going on, don't believe in it. And I call it those Holocaust deniers that they're stupid. They're nothing but just talk, because all the evidence is still in existence. All the camps you go to today, Auschwitz, Dachau, Majdanek, Treblinka, Buchenwald, all the gas chambers and the ovens are still there, and you have thousands of people daily before the COVID. They're down there every day. There were thousands from all over the world. There's people going and witnessing. So don't believe what they tell you.
Thank you very much for that answer. One of the audience members would like to clarify. You mentioned that after the war ended, you felt safer in Germany than you did in Poland. Can you explain that, please, and talk about the circumstances that made you feel safer in Germany after the war?
Because in Germany, because they had the guilt, Germans had the guilt. So they were trying to do whatever they could to survive us. Not to, so that we don't think of them, what happened. So that's why they treated us very good. That's why we were safe in Germany.
Thank you very much. And question from Cantor Stacy. She would like to know roughly how many kids you think, and audiences in general, how many people do you think you've spoken to through the museum? And to your knowledge, have you ever met a denier?
No, I've never met a denier, but I've spoken, I think, to tens of thousands of people. Because I've spoken to, but for instance, last year, through the museum, I went to Bakersfield, and I spoke there in one day. I spoke 3 times, over 1,000 kids in one day. Plus other schools around here. One school in the North Hollywood last year spoke was 1,600 kids in one school, and so forth. In every school, the other schools, I speak to the museum, and also in private homes. So I would say tens of thousands of people I spoke to them.
Thank you very much. And I can clarify, before the pandemic, Joe would speak to students at least once a week to large classes, 40, 50 students at least. And he's been doing this for about 4 years and now on Zoom as well. So Joe has spoken to many, many students.
I spoke yesterday, Michael. I spoke yesterday to a school. I spoke yesterday here in the Pacific Palisades. Were over 300 people. They said they only had room for 300, and more people were trying to get in on Zoom yesterday. It was Holocaust Day.
Well, and of course, as always, thank you so much for doing that. Somebody would like to know, going back a little bit, if you remember the moments that you were separated from your family members and what that was like, and acknowledging that this is a painful question, do you remember if you had the chance to say goodbye?
Well, yes, I had the chance to say goodbye when I went out. My parents decided for me, my sister and brother to go back home to get out of the worship gift. That's the last time I saw him. That's the only time I had the chance to say goodbye. And that's about it.
Thank you very much. When you came to the United States, we have a few questions about settling here. What did you do for work?
Well, I say when I came here, I was a tailor. First, I got a job here in Los Angeles, working as a tailor in one of the shops, and that wasn't a good experience because I got to a shop and I was working for 2 weeks. I was making $19 a week. They said, after 2 weeks, you can join the union and you'll get $30 a week. So after the 2 weeks, I went and I joined the union, and Monday morning I come back to work, and the farmer said, "You're fired." He didn't want to pay $30. So the uncle, my cousin's uncle, had a store in Riverside. So he told me, go to Riverside, and you'll be your own boss. He had clothes there, and I was making shirts and pants and put it in the store until a short time. That was 1950, when the Korean War started, and they mobilized the National Guard. So Victorville was an Air Force base. They closed it in 46. And now they reopened the base, and I got a tailor shop there at the base. So I was at the base for 7 years, and then I came to Los Angeles in open a store here in Los Angeles on Melrose called the Los Angeles Uniform Exchange. And so I was here for 37 years at the store, and then I retired. We sold the store and retired.
Thank you so much. So you talked a little bit about the process of coming to the United States, and when you finally got here, you were able to find this work as a tailor, and then you started your business. What was your family structure? Did you start a family?
I started a family here in Los Angeles after when I moved to Los Angeles. I got married, and we started a family. And I have a daughter and a son. But my wife passed away about 26 years ago, on cancer.
Where did you meet your wife?
That's another story. Well, I met my wife in 1957. After I left Victorville, I went on a vacation back east. And I went back to the city of Harrisburg. And I met my wife there then. And we got married in Harrisburg and came back to Los Angeles.
Thank you very much. When did you first start sharing your story, and did you talk about it to your wife and children as they were growing up?
Yes. Yes, I did. I always did. When I started to speak, is the first time I think was 1997. I had a friend here in Culver City, and he belonged to a club. It was the Jews and Gentiles, or the Exchange Club. They were meeting every Tuesday for lunch. So one day he said, Joe, why don't you come, why don't you talk to our people? So that was 1997. That was the first time I spoke. And then I had a neighbor who were teaching a museum at the synagogue, the Bet Am synagogue here. She was teaching Holocaust lessons, study, and she asked me to come and talk to her students several times. And so on, that's when I was going out, was talking to her school, the other schools. And then I met, at one time, I know a man called Bob Gemender, who was a member of the Holocaust Museum. And his son met a friend of his and told him about me. So Bob called me and he asked me if I want to come to talk to the museum. And that was about 3-4 years ago. And I haven't been speaking there since.
Thank you very much. And I would actually just like to share with everybody that Bob Jeminder was on our board of directors. He spoke at our museum regularly. Unfortunately, he passed away. And he actually passed away 2 years ago yesterday, coincidentally, on International Holocaust Remembrance Day. But he will be part of our museum, and of course, we were grateful that he is really.
Yeah, he was a wonderful man. Great.
He really was. Yes, thank you for mentioning him. Do you know, or at least approximately, how many relatives of yours perished in the Holocaust? So with your immediate family, and then your cousins, aunts, and uncles.
I don't know exactly. I never got through counting, but I know there were several hundred relatives because we have big families. My father had three sisters, and my mother had two, three sisters and one brother, and they all had kids, grandkids. So it was a lot. We had a big family.
Thank you very much. Moving forward again to the United States, do you remember what it was like to learn English?
It wasn't easy, but when I came here, so like I had the shop in Victor on the base, so I had no choice. I had to learn English as fast as I could, because that's all I was dealing with is the American people. So it took some little time, but I tried the best I could.
Thank you very much. Do you did you ever face prejudice in the United States?
Not personally. I never, no, never faced any personal pressure.
When you lived in, or since you lived in Los Angeles, have you cultivated a lot of friendships with other Holocaust survivors?
Yes, yes, I did. Matter of fact, I had several Holocaust survivors. I was in the camps with them together. But unfortunately, they're all gone. I don't have anybody left, which I was in the camps with them. The only ones I have is a couple of the children from the survivors. So I have three of them, three children of the survivors.
Do you remember what year you were naturalized?
1956.
Thank you. Did your family, how religious was your family before 1939, before your life changed, and did that play a role in your survival?
Yes, it did. Yeah, now my father, we were Orthodox, but modern Orthodox. Matter of fact, my father, we had a synagogue in our house. I had on the second floor, we rented a room for a Jewish organization which was called the Free Loan. They were giving loans to the poor people without no interest. And my father was the secretary, where they used to come every Friday make a payment. So, but they used the room once a month for a couple hours. So the room stayed empty. So my dad made a synagogue. We used to have services there every weekend and holidays. So it was I was very orthodox.
Thank you very much. Do you remember any kind of thing that you might have thought to yourself during these years when you were in concentration camps about your own survival? Anything that you might have thought to yourself to help get you through it, or any hope about the future?
Well, I've been speaking to all the schools, to the kids. A lot of them asked me the same question. Did you ever think of giving up? I said, no, I never did. I never lost faith and never lost hope. I used to tell him, if I thought I had a bad day, I said, today may be a bad day, but I hope tomorrow will be a better day. But never give up. Don't lose faith and never give up. And I get letters from those kids, and they all remember the words I'm telling them. They always remember that. Never give up.
Thank you very much. How do you feel after you share your story? And you mentioned that you've been doing it for quite some time now. Has it gotten easier to do over the years?
Yes, it gotten easier because you keep on telling the people, and the more people are listening, the better it is. So you know that you're doing your job. You're doing something that people will remember what happened. And don't let it forget. So remember what happened. And hope it doesn't happen again.
Thank you. We have some young students who are watching today, and one of them would like to know if you consider yourself or other survivors heroes.
No, don't consider myself any hero. I'm just a survivor and trying to educate young kids to let them know. Because there's so many kids at the schools today don't even saying that they never heard of the Holocaust. So, and they never knew a lot of Auschwitz, they don't know what Auschwitz means. They never heard of it. So this is why every day, if I can just get one or two of them to let them know what happened, it makes me happy.
Well, thank you so much, Joe, as always, for sharing your story with us this afternoon. Again, thank you also for all the years that you have been educating students at the museum, for in person and now on Zoom for the last year. You've been doing this for such a long time, and as you said, you've probably reached tens of thousands of people, including today we had about 100 people listening here just on Zoom, and people will be listening on Facebook afterwards as well. So we thank you so much, and anybody in the audience who is interested or who knows any educators, please remind them that our museum offers virtual field trips, virtual tours of the museum with survivor speakers. As the survivors who founded our museum in the 1960s mandated, our programs are free of charge, and our goal is to educate to the public and especially to young students. So if anybody knows teachers, please pass on the word and pass on our website. Joe, again, thank you so much for sharing with us this afternoon. And if there's anything you would like to say to conclude to our audience and to some of the students who are watching with us today, you're welcome to do so.
Yes, I would like to say, I've spoken even in Italy, in Rome. I spoke to a graduating class. And also I spoke in Florence, in Italy, to a group. And also I speak here through the museum. I think I've reached people globally, because after one time, this last year, I spoke here, and I had a call from Israel. My cousins in Israel said they saw me. They are speaking and also a friend of mine in London, England. They called me and said they saw me in England. So and also I know people from Germany that they said they saw me in Germany. So I don't know how many other countries. So how important it is to reach globally people. So I think that's very important, and it's a big honor for me to do that.
Well, thank you so much again for speaking this afternoon and for everything you do to educate our community and our world now with technology. So, as you said, this can be shown almost anywhere in the world now.
That's right.
So, thank you. Wishing everybody a happy, healthy, and safe weekend ahead. Thank you again, Joe, and thank you to our audience for tuning in. We hope to see you next Thursday at 11 o'clock for our weekly Public Survivor Talk. And please follow our website and our Facebook page, our social media, to see about the rest of our upcoming programs. We have all sorts of programs that going on virtually during this time, so please tune in. Thank you very much again, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, everybody, for listening.